Episode 5.5 Ingram. Ingram was already running before the wall imploded. He was a man raised around and, in no small way, by machines. When on familiar terrain, he could tell just from listening how heavy a vehicle was, as well as what matter of engine it used. He often used this skill to determine what was wrong within his own convoy, listening with his mechanics and advisors to the rumbling heartbeat of his rigs, subtly tuning them until they all sang true. This did come with its limitations, but there were general rules one could follow. If a machine sounded like wheels, it was built for speed and relatively smooth terrain. If treads, it was usually for hauling or dealing with adverse conditions. This thumping was rare. The suppliers themselves, despite a century of trundling across the continent, rarely if ever saw something that used jointed legs more than once in a lifetime. Most wouldn't have recognized the sound. Ingram knew it from something he'd seen in his childhood. It descended on them like a panther leaping on a group of wasteland hares. The crawler's first target was the caretaker wielding the tome. Rather than attempting to get out of the way, they held up the tome and read from it. A sound like shattering glass erupted from the caretaker, and an invisible shockwave slapped the crawler back, flipping it end over end as its legs flailed helplessly. As this happened, all four of the other caretakers opened up with their weapons. Lightning-bright arcs of concentrated heat smashed into one of the hip joints. The metal glowed white-hot, pushed towards liquefaction. For an instant, it looked as though the caretakers would destroy the thing. The first cloying fingers of relief tried to take hold of Ingram, but he knew better. He had seen the crawlers on that early morning so many years ago. He remembered the desperate attempts of the doomed men to save themselves from being pulled apart, vaporized, and crushed. Most importantly, he knew it was useless to do anything but run. Where was Casey? He looked around, desperate to find his walking payday. There he was on his hands and knees, head bowed as though in prayer, as he repeatedly tried and failed to regain his feet. No amount of profit is worth this trouble, he growled to himself, sprinting toward Casey and grabbing him by the collar. He half-dragged the man toward the Lancer and shoved him behind the thickest part of its chassis, just as the crawler opened up with the salvo of propelled grenades. This turned two of the caretakers into a fine mist. The explosion rocked the ground. Great slabs of pavement heaved, rippled, and split, overwhelmed by the sudden kinetic force. Somehow, this had not damaged the Lancer. An idea began to form in Ingram's mind. "Case," he said. "Case, listen. Can you hear me?" Casey's lips had turned blue, his face the pale hue of adhesive paste. Cursing again, Ingram placed both of his hands over Casey's diaphragm and pushed hard. He coughed, face regaining color as he took in a breath of air. He stared up at Ingram, one eye blinking slower than the other. "What the fuck is going on?" he asked, voice rough and words slurred. "One of the other corporations sent their own people, most likely Thornhill." Ingram scowled. "It looks like news of you got out after all. You're in high demand." Ingram looked at the Lancer, shifting his weight uncomfortably as his idea came into concrete certainty. The only way to stop a thing like the crawler was with another vehicle. "Stay here unless I tell you to move. There is still profit to be made, but not if you get killed." With that, Ingram climbed inside the Lancer. Like most of Convoy Menagerie's vehicles, it had been used for mining. It was smaller, probably used for hauling things, like parts for the larger rigs back in the day. From its front protruded two tongs, which had been sharpened to spear-like points. Within them sat two electromagnets that, when wound up, attracted almost any piece of metal with the force of a fastball. Ingram revved the Lancer's engine to life, aiming at the crawler. He slammed on the accelerator, shooting towards the battle like a bullet. The caretaker with the tome was the last one standing, their comrades inside strewn about like thick watercolors. The crawler was in the process of launching another salvo of grenades. Again, rather than move out of the way, the caretaker read from their tome. The sound of a snapping steel cable crashed into Ingram's ears, even through the shell of the Lancer. None of the grenades came within 10 feet of the caretaker. Rather, they exploded in a circle around their target, leaving the tome wielder on an island of pavement which was still intact. With insect-like speed, the crawler once again leapt at them. In a last-ditch effort to exact some revenge for the deaths of their partners, the caretaker shouted one more word, holding up their tome as though to shield themselves from the inevitable blow. The crawler swatted down at them with one of its massive legs, instantly pasting the tome user. Doing this, however, spelled out the crawler's own doom. The sound of a bursting firecracker echoed through the night as the crawler's leg crumpled. It looked as though it had been seized by a giant hand. Ingram used this opportunity. He rammed the Lancer into the machine. The screech of metal tore through the air like a death cry, electromagnets ripping open the crawler's armor with invisible hands. Sparks shot out as hydraulic fluid and lubricant welled up like ichor from a wound. The whole impression was like a stag beetle piercing the side of a gigantic tarantula. For a desperate moment, the crawler scrambled its remaining 5 legs against the outer hull of the Lancer, but they were soon caught in the magnetic field. With the crawler unable to move, Ingram reached under the Lancer's front console and rearranged a few wires. Then he threw open the Lancer's door. In one leap, he was out and running. He was weightless, each step feeling like a 7-mile stride. Behind him, he heard the furious whirring of gears and gyroscopes as the crawler tried and failed to detach itself from the deadly barb. There was nothing it could do. For the 3rd time that night, the air was filled with a ringing explosion as the Lancer sent an electrical surge into its own battery, causing it to combust. This fire was more than enough to burn the crawler. The hoses pumping its fluids went up almost instantly, adding ferocity to the blaze. Soon, its chassis and arms, hell, even the armor plating would all be liquid. The people piloting the crawler never stood a chance, baked alive almost instantly. This, unfortunately, meant the same for his Lancer. Still, it was better than being crushed to death. Ingram turned and squinted through the heat as he picked up a handful of crushed pavement. He threw the fistful at the still visible body of the Lancer, saying a single word. Cowabunga. He did not know the definition, its meaning lost somewhere in the backwash of history. He did know, however, that when a machine went out performing as noble a function as that Lancer, its memory was to be honored. Though not alive, a machine would take care of its owner, even unto its own death. This was more than could be said for most people in Ingram's experience. He stumbled back toward Casey, who hadn't moved. He was lying curled up, eyes closed, dead to the world. Ingram paused for a moment to make sure his payday was still breathing, then ignored him. He headed toward the Adirac's half-destroyed pod. One of the slabs of pavement had landed on it, crumpling its front entirely. It seemed like luck was still on his side after all. He opened the pod's rear compartment, exposing its engine. It took only a second for Ingram to find what he was looking for. A red metal box about the size of a briefcase. He tore it out of the surrounding circuitry, a scene reminiscent of the primal days when man would rip organs out of a choice kill. He slung the box over his shoulder with its built-in rubber strap. Only then did he walk back to Casey. "Time to go," he said, nudging Casey with his foot. Casey groaned, uncurled himself, and looked up at Ingram with uncomprehending eyes. Ingram held out a hand for Casey to grab. Casey continued to stare, saying nothing. Ingram, taking after his pap, refused to repeat himself. He bent over, wrapped two massive hands around Casey's shoulders, and hauled him to his feet. Then, reaching back one fist, he cuffed Casey across the mouth. The man stumbled back but did not fall. He caught himself, spat, and glared at Ingram. "What the fuck?" he said, voice weak but filled with venom. "You're not shutting down on me," Ingram replied. "I have a payday waiting for me, and you are the key. You and I are going to the Adirak Towers, where I am going to complete this transaction. Once you are safe and I have my payment, then and only then may you go catatonic." "I just watched people get scrunched from existence," Casey said, face darkening. "Someone with a book knocked over a multi-ton killer robot with nothing but their voice, so you'll excuse me, motherfucker, if I'm a bit in a state of shock." Casey was on the verge of yelling, but Ingram barked out a laugh. He couldn't help it. "Yes, good. Get angry. Even if you have to be angry at me. It's more productive than shock." He looked Casey up and down before continuing. "I will need your help if both of us are to make it in one piece." Casey narrowed his eyes, analyzing his companion and seeming to weigh his options. "Where are we going?" he finally asked. "Weren't these your contacts?" Ingram's smile widened. He had been prepared to choke Casey out and tie him up, dragging him along if necessary. This cooperation was much more preferred. "We go to Adirak Tower 1. It's the heart of their corporation, and the only place where we are not going to be attacked in this whole damn community." "How long will it take to get there?" Casey asked. "Conservatively, about a day." "Well, that's not too bad," Casey said, brightening. "Of course, that doesn't include any conflicts that might rise along the way," Ingram said. "With how things are looking, the Adiracts are in a tough spot. This community might not be as safe as it used to." "Then why do business with them?" Casey asked. "Why not sell my services to the people who sent that big spider thing?" "I'm not on the best terms with the other corporates in this city. Adirak has always been the most willing to deal, so that's where I kept my focus. Besides, I got us a key." He held up the red box, waggling it for Casey to see. "Without the correct key, the corporate's automated defense systems would kill us before a human even begins to get involved. The closest Thornhill key is in that big fire over there." Ingram pointed to the still-burning wreckage of the crawler. "If you want to grab it for us, be my guest. I'll be waiting here to put you out." Casey sighed, clearly realizing he had no choice but to go with Ingram. "We gotta make tracks before anything else comes," he finally said, walking in the direction from which the Adirak pod had come. "You follow me, do what I say, and don't lose it. We'll both get to the tower safely." He held out his hand in the customary supplier sign of agreement. Casey took it. The deal was made. Ingram could salvage this. He could return to the convoy a hero, his position more secure than ever. More importantly, Diana would be happy with him. The good old days were on the cusp of coming back. Ingram could feel it. Greg could feel time running out, even as the anti-anxiety effects of his sig took hold. He had gone through nearly half his stash since this whole debacle started, and would have to pick up more soon. He'd done his best to track Sarah and that woman she was with. Reports said it was one of the smugglers. This meant, of course, that it wasn't in fact a rival corporation to which Sarah was defecting, but to the Scorched themselves. The Scorched were a cult. They lived in Old Town, fighting to protect it from what they called the corruptive influence. What a waste of life, Greg thought to himself as he filled the van with smoke, flipping through the onboard radio's channels. He put out an all-call. "Who's got sight of her?" he said. Silence. He was about to put out another call, but Austin responded. Austin, of course, couldn't talk, so what came through was a series of long and short tones. Morse code. Greg cursed inwardly, mentally shifting gears to begin a conversation that was half dots and dashes. "I see the woman she was with, pursuing. I think she's going to..." Greg waited for him to finish. "Going to what, Austin?" "Amoeba." That one word made Greg's blood run cold. He had seen people devoured by them, swallowed whole and near instantly dissolved into the gelatinous goo. "Where?" Greg asked, fighting to keep a semblance of control over his voice. "The woman. She's leading them. I think..." "Be advised," another voice called in. It came over one of the emergency channels, overriding whatever Austin was about to say. "The target has one of our guns. Repeat, she has an energy rifle." Greg cursed, waving at the driver to bring the van closer to the action as he pulled up a hologram of the surrounding area. While the van itself didn't have a computer that could process all of that information, the feed of each caretaker was being sent to the Adirak computer systems over an encrypted relay. This computer collated the information it received, not only of each caretaker's vitals, but also of the external sensors within their suits. This resulted in real-time coverage of the scene unfolding. Greg watched in terrified fascination as the woman, the skinniest, dirtiest woman Greg had ever seen, scrambled from cover to cover, taking pot shots at Adirak caretakers with one of their own weapons. As she hit them, Greg realized she wasn't aiming to kill. She was doing much worse. Each shot went through a joint in the caretaker armor, vaporizing the thin protective material and exposing burned, bloody flesh to the air. Even as Greg wrinkled his nose at the imagined smell, he heard the nearly subsonic roar of the massive amoeba as they surged behind the woman. He activated the radio for another all-call. "Someone overload that gun now! Turn her into a damn crater!" "Working on it," came another voice. "She has a jammer, but will be through in approximately 2 minutes." Greg let out a breath which turned into a low growl of frustration near the end. There was nothing he could do but wait for those 2 minutes to be over. He watched as the woman managed to stay just ahead of the horde of amoeba as they surged like a cancer through the streets of Old Town. Each instinct Greg had screamed to call off the chase, but he couldn't let go now. He was so close. Eventually, the woman disappeared under a manhole cover and wasn't seen again. "Hopefully the amoebas devour her down there," he muttered to himself. The thought was small consolation, however, as the damage was already done. For several minutes, the chase was off and all was chaos. Waves of amoebas attacked the caretakers, and Greg's electric field of view shrunk as each one was enveloped and digested. Someone finally got the bright idea to start fighting the creatures with fire, using their rifle beams to ignite several of the surrounding buildings. Eventually, the last of the amoebas were pushed back into the sewer. Greg had just let out a sigh of relief when shots rang out. The hologram showed figures appearing on various rooftops and from behind piles of rubble. The Scorched. Now that the immediate threat of being food had been pushed back, the locals were going to get restless. "Austin," Greg said into his mic. "Austin, the Scorched are on you." "Noticed. In cover," came the reply. "Austin, things have gone too far. We're not here to fight the Scorched," Greg said. "Get our people out of there. We're going to regroup before this fire spreads." "No," Austin replied. "Damn it, Austin, this isn't a request. I'm telling you to follow me and get the fuck out. Get to the location I'm sending you for pickup." Greg went to order everyone else to leave as well, but the sound of a muffled explosion came from both in and around the headphones Greg wore. "We just broke through that jamming signal," a voice said in Greg's still ringing ears. "If that bitch was holding on to our gun, she's missed it by now." "Good job," Greg responded through clenched teeth. "You might have even got her, if she decided to be a complete moron." The phone in Greg's pocket went off. He looked at the ID and felt a stab of icy terror go through his guts. Can I please just catch a fucking break? He cried. The phone kept ringing, despite his plea to the universe. After the fourth or fifth ring, he answered. Yes, Mr. Adarak? Hello, Greg. The voice on the other line was paper-thin and razor-sharp. It made his blood run cold. Things have gotten out of hand. Retrieval of the opus has been transitioned to external threats. Bring everyone home. My brother needs to speak with you. Yes, sir, Greg answered. The line clicked. Greg lowered the phone, slipping it from numb fingers into his breast pocket. He then pushed the all-recall button on the radio. Don't recall, Austin said over his channel. Close to the explosion, eyes on the woman. She's trapped. Easy target. I just got a call from Felix, Greg said, his voice distant in his own ears. Oh, we fucked up, Austin stated. Yeah, I would agree, Greg answered. He resisted for a moment before lighting up the last cig from his current pack, throwing the butt of the other on the floor of the van to join its brethren. We fucked up, and now we ourselves are soon to be fucked. It's Willard we are going to be meeting with. Be there 5 minutes, Austin said. Then the line went silent. For the first time in nearly an hour, Greg removed the headphones and gave his ears a rest from their vice-like grip. Things were indeed out of hand, but there was a way out. Not a way out of reprimand, of course, but a way out of being flayed alive, at least. He just had to think of how to present his recent actions in the most reasonable way. Willard Adarak. Greg shuddered at the name, but couldn't help but laugh at the one obvious bright spot. It was cold comfort, but if he got killed, at least he wouldn't have to spend any more money on cigs. Season 1, Epilogue. Adarak. Felix's face was a terror to behold. Haggard with age, it twitched under the force of its own muscles as they pulled at the stapled skin. The horror was only accented by the near perfection of his body. Copper-toned, it gleamed like burnished bronze. Clouds of steam billowed off it in the cold chamber, the temperature a minor representation of the icy chill of space itself. He wore no clothes, save for a single necklace and pendant of gold. He had no genitals, the skin between his legs smooth and round like the underside of a mannequin. Just as well, Felix Adarak and lust should never meet for the sake of public safety. His brother Willard stood across from him. In contrast to Felix, Will Adarak wore a black suit, his pale hands and face appearing to float against the void darkness of the room. Were a normal human to stand between the brothers, they would believe the one to be a demigod descended to earth, while the other a mere phantasm given flesh. They spoke without speaking, thought without thinking. With souls bound to each other, they communed. "Brother, please understand," came Felix's passage. "Things got out of hand faster than I anticipated. I thought my people could handle it." Will didn't respond with words. An image of a building going up in flames hit Felix like a physical blow as the recalled death of each caretaker appeared in clear, painful detail between them. The message was crystalline. Willard hated to waste resources. "I understand the cost was great, but what does it matter? We need that opus back." "No," came the response from Willard. Felix shook his head. "What do you mean, no?" He took a step forward, pointing at his brother. "We put in years of work, millions of man-hours, resources that can never be regained, all to bring our dream to fruition. Without it,
We may as well dismantle the whole deal and go start again in some other community.
One is coming who will recover it for us. A twitch of a smile on Willard's ghost-like face. One who is already within the city.
The one from the dome? Felix asked.
The same. He will play both sides.
Is this a good idea?
We have no choice. Things will be ready soon. The forces are moving. Can't you feel it?
No, Felix said. All I feel is the desire to stop pretending. I'm so bored. When may I begin my work?
From somewhere above, dim lights flooded the room in an amber color. A half-rotted face, 10 feet tall and 7 feet broad, stood bolted to the wall behind Willard. Long hair, the color of nighttime clouds, rolled from the top of its head. Sunken, desiccated eyes peered lifelessly from within its sockets. Scaffold walkways circled the face like construction around a 20th century building.
I see the good doctor has made progress since her transformation, Felix commented.
She does please us, Will responded. They ascended the walkway, approaching her face. They drank from the constant stream of tears trickling down her cheeks. It didn't get them drunk exactly. Rather, it got them more sober. The veneer of what they thought of as reality peeled away, and soon they stood under a cloudless opalescent sky, hovering over the city splayed out in its vast grandeur. Willard, as was his right, took the lead. He pointed out 2 people, a man and a woman. We will bring the man here as soon as is possible, Willard said.
What of Sarah? Felix asked.
She will come here when it is her time. We will, by then, already have the opus she stole back in our possession. There will be no other choice left to her. They were in different parts of the city, different parts of their lives. One was running from guilt, the other from terror. But something beyond their power or understanding was even now wrapping its tendrils around them, drawing them together. A good pair. A worthy sacrifice. You have been listening to Dead Arcology, written and recorded by me, Michael K. Ostis. If you enjoyed this story, please consider sharing it. I have episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean, as well as several others. Updates, schedules, and news can be found on the website, deadarcology.com, as well as on the social media apps Blue Sky and Instagram under the username Dead Arcology. If you want to help Dead Arcology grow more directly, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/deadarcology. Thank you again for listening. It really helps a lot. I very much appreciate you giving this story your time. Goodbye.